Hi everyone. In this video, I'd like to talk about defense mechanisms, one of which is avoidance, which is a big issue for people that have come from narcissistic families. So let's have a look at an article on my website. My website is childrenofnarcissists.org.uk, and the article is called Avoiding the Avoidable. So let's go and have a look. What is avoidance? Avoidance is the act of keeping away from, not doing something, or preventing something from happening. It can be seen on a spectrum from being a defense mechanism to being a disorder. What are we avoiding? So we're avoiding the external world in ways and our internal world in other ways. Narcissistic parents are very unstable, and their children are aware from a young age that the parent can be easily set off and triggered into a punishing or controlling mood state. This usually takes the form of rage, criticism, and silent treatments. There can also be violence or very dramatic outcomes, such as being told to leave the house for a period of time. So by that I mean a parent that would say, get out the house, don't come back till tomorrow, or lock their children out of the house. Or ultimately, what happens for a lot of children of narcissists is eventually their parents throw them out of the house. So whenever I hear of someone that says, oh, my mother threw me out or my father threw me out when I was 14 or 15 or 16, I generally think that's somebody with a narcissistic parent, because that's quite standard for their behaviour. Children in narcissistic families will start developing patterns of avoidance of the things which trigger the narcissistic parent from early childhood. They learn to walk on eggshells. So children of narcissists are going to be familiar with this concept. Being assertive, independent, demanding, and by demanding I mean being a normal child and needing to have your needs met, or being happy when the narcissist is angry, invoke punishing behaviours. This means children of narcissists develop behaviours of being appeasing, compliant, and passive. Ultimately, what they are avoiding are the feelings of humiliation, rejection, and abandonment. So the narcissistic parent rejects the real, authentic self of their child as they mould their child into what they want them to be. So the real self of the child regularly gets humiliated, rejected, and underlying that is the chronic fear of abandonment. As a child of a narcissist, we learn that life is painful, and what we naturally deduce from how we are treated is that there is something so bad inside us and that we are such an awful person that those parts of us need to be hidden. We begin to strive to avoid those feelings, memories, and parts of ourselves that we feel ashamed of. And we attempt to repress those things and any reminders of them which may bring them to the surface. We are deeply wounded and we avoid reminders of those wounds. We long for love and acceptance, and we change and adapt ourselves to try to achieve being loved and accepted in a family where there is no unconditional love. We may develop a fear or phobia of our painful feelings, and so develop avoidant behaviours around being in touch with our internal world. We may fear our feelings of shame, rage and anger, the need to be loved and cared for, or any feelings of distress or emotional overwhelm. We often connect an emotion to a belief and then think of the belief as a fact. So when we feel anger, it can mean I'm angry and it's bad to be angry, so I'm a bad person. And then I'm also worthless because I'm a bad person. Shame may then be triggered. This reinforces our belief that we are a bad person, and these feelings can feel intolerable or deeply uncomfortable. And so we prefer to avoid these rather than to feel them. Our avoidance can be conscious or subconscious, and it's a survival mechanism. So there's really a lot going on for children of narcissists subconsciously. So we're going to want to be avoidant of that. We're avoiding our own triggers, and we're avoiding triggering the narcissistic parent as well. And then we're going to move through the world like that, aren't we? We're going to become people pleasing, and we're going to try to avoid triggering what we're going to apply universally to life, that the triggers for our narcissistic parents are going to be triggers for society in general. That's a generalization, but it's kind of how triggers work. They do end up working like that. So our personal triggers, we develop our own set of triggers. We modify our own behaviour to avoid triggers and uncomfortable situations. And this way of living can become central to our lives. We can be obsessive about the avoidance of triggers. Triggers can be things such as angry or neutral faces. So angry faces, obviously, but neutral faces also because they're hard to read. So many children of narcissists feel uncomfortable around neutral blank faces. These can be triggering. Not being able to read someone, being judged or criticised, being ignored, being put on the spot, eye contact, emotions, because these can be felt as they're weak or vulnerable. Rejection, being the centre of attention. There are many things that can be triggers. I'll put a link to an article in the description about triggers, common triggers for children of narcissists or for people that have had trauma, and what a triggered reaction feels like, so we can more easily recognise when we've been triggered by something. Because what a trigger means in adulthood is that we're kind of going into a feeling flashback and we're reliving the past. So it can be good to develop an idea of what our triggers are, what our triggered responses feel like in our developing our self-awareness as we recover from having a childhood with a narcissistic parent. What does being avoidant look like in practice? So I've done some examples of avoidant behaviours. We may find that being around other people is stressful, and so we retreat as much as we can, and we may spend a lot of time alone. So we avoid people in general. We may fear rejection, so that we struggle to make friends or start romantic relationships. We will avoid asking for help as we fear feeling vulnerable, others having power over us, and or being rejected. We may never or only rarely make arrangements to meet others and may usually wait to be invited. We may go away for Christmas or Easter so we can avoid the holidays where we feel other happy families are having a great time, or we can't tolerate being with our family of origin. So we might go, if we've got the money, we might go to Italy for Christmas just to get away from the family, so that if people ask us, what did you do for Christmas? You can say, I went on a holiday to wherever, rather than say, I was by myself or something. There can be a lot of shame and stigma around not spending holidays as part of a big family. We may walk down quiet roads and avoid main roads as we don't want to see a lot of people. So we might struggle being in busy places or going shopping and avoid people as much as we can. We might go early in the morning, let's say at 9 a.m. when the shops are not so busy. We may be self-conscious of looking at ourselves so much that we avoid our photo being taken or looking in the mirror. And many children of narcissists have body issues that could be seen as body dysmorphia, actually, body dysmorphic disorder, because they have a really complex relationship with their body. And they've been shamed a lot for their body. They've been criticised a lot for the way they look, the clothes they wear, criticised in general. So this can really get focused in the body, and there can be a lot of body dysmorphia. We may avoid making phone calls because we can't see the other person and therefore can't read them fully, as we only have their voice to go on. Lots of people with narcissistic parents struggle with this, really not liking being on the phone. We may avoid socialising with co-workers. We may get quite drunk quite quickly at an event to avoid the feelings of social anxiety. So we can feel quite overwhelmed when we're at a party or something like that, and then we want to drink to take the edge off that because it feels quite unbearable. We find it hard to look into people's eyes for any sustained amount of time, and we may be avoidant of eye contact. So we might look down a lot, or we might meet somebody's eyes and then after a couple of seconds it feels a bit too intense, so we might look down or away. There can be a lot of issues around eye contact. We avoid the possibility of upsetting others by being people-pleasing. We may have an avoidance of trying as we fear failure, so we might make safe choices. So this can be fear of criticism as well. We may take a day off sick from school, university or work rather than giving a presentation. And we can avoid our feelings by keeping very busy, being a workaholic, going into addictive behaviours like shopping, overeating, drinking alcohol or smoking. So just a few examples of the way there that we can avoid our triggers, avoid triggering other people, avoid our fears of triggering other people. And we can end up narrowing our lives down quite substantially as we're avoiding the feelings of danger from the outside world and then the feelings of danger from our internal world as well. Ultimately, the fear of falling apart, the fear of not being able to function. So these are going to be huge for people, and that's why we develop these patterns of avoidance. A narrow life. We can end up cutting many people, places and things out of our lives. This can result in us leading quite a limited existence. Our quality of life may become low. Some people can end up staying in a lot of the time and avoiding other people as much as possible. It can be an isolating experience. As long as we avoid our feelings, we can't heal those wounded parts of us. So part of the healing process is going towards the triggers rather than avoiding them. But this comes further down the path. So first in healing, we want to develop self-awareness. We want to become more stable, and then we can tolerate looking at the things that we've been avoiding looking at for many years. How do we heal? By being curious. We're observing ourselves and what we are thinking, doing and feeling. And if we can, do it in a non-judgmental way. Obviously, lots of people have a strong inner critic, a harsh inner critic when they've come from a narcissistic family. That will resolve itself in time as well. So as much as you can, being curious without being judgmental. So being curious develops our self-awareness. Our self-awareness helps us to tolerate more uncomfortable feelings. We begin to have a deeper understanding of ourselves as what we do and think begins to make more sense. And this is vital in being able to feel self-compassion, is that we need to be able to understand why we do the things that we do really, rather than going to a place in our mind where we think, I'm crazy, I don't make sense, I'm irrational, I'm whatever the narrative is that we tell ourselves. And those narratives are also defenses in their own ways. But as we push through and we start to understand why we do things, then this leads to self-compassion for ourselves and for other people as well. Because our relationship with ourselves changes, the shame and confusion subside, and we can get to a place where we like and feel more comfortable with ourselves. And that's where we want to be, isn't it? Therapy can help. Therapy with a qualified therapist who understands trauma can help with recovering from a childhood with a narcissist and dealing with our patterns of avoidance. Some of you might not consider it trauma. Lots of people prefer the words difficult childhood or dysfunctional childhood. But a therapist who understands the effects of trauma is going to be really helpful in your healing, because they can understand it in a way that perhaps a therapist who doesn't understand trauma can't until they've had that training, because the ramifications and consequences of growing up with a narcissistic parent are profound, far-reaching and very deep. And it's not something that can be recovered from quickly or very easily. So I hope that video was useful and the information here is useful. I think it's really important to understand that concept of avoidance, because we are setting up strong patterns of avoidance when we've come from this kind of background. And yeah, so again, more defenses that we're going to work through and then eventually replace them with the more mature defenses, as mentioned in the other video, which was called Common Defense Mechanisms. And yeah, getting to a place where we have the more mature defenses of sublimation, compensation when it's done in a healthy way, and that assertive communication, which I talk about at the end of my video, which is called Common Defense Mechanisms. So I hope that information was useful for you, and take care of yourselves.